Hi, welcome back. In this session, we will deploy the proxy application from API Manager. And in order to deploy the application, we need to create the API specification and publish to Exchange. And after publishing to Exchange, we will test the application from API console and also from Postman by using mocking service. Mocking service is a feature given by Anypoint to test the API to understand the behavior of the API. So after testing, we will deploy the proxy application from API Manager. So now let's go to Design Center and let's take an example of existing API. If you are not sure how to create the API specification, you can watch the previous sessions. Okay, currently we have a get employees API where the API consumer can get the list of employees based on department name and joining year. There is a constraint set for department name and the API is ready to publish to Exchange. So now let's publish to Exchange. So once the API is published to Anypoint Exchange, then the API portal will be created for it so that other developers or API consumer can understand more about the API, the behavior of the API and the inputs and output of the API. So now currently API is published to Exchange. We are currently in the Exchange, the API portal. We can see that we have a get employee where we have query parameters and response. And here we can use the mocking service to test the API. Here we can see that we have a mocking service. This is a feature from Anypoint using which we can test the API. Let's click on send. We can use this service to test the API. So now let's test this get employees API. Okay, we are getting the response. This response is based on the example that we have defined in the API specification. We can use the mocking service again from Exchange and test the API so that the API consumer can understand the behavior of the API. So this is the feature that we can use from Design Center and also from Exchange. And if we want to test the same API from Postman, we can use the public URL of the mocking service. So this way we can get the public URL and we'll give the API information. Employees is the API and department and joining date are the query parameters. We can use this option. We can make it public and get the URL, and we can use the same URL for testing. Okay, this way we can test the API from Postman by using the public mocking service so that we can test the behavior of the API. Currently we are using the mocking service and we have not deployed anywhere, but we are just using the mocking service to test the API. So now let's go to API Manager and we'll try to deploy the application. The same application, the employee API application, we will deploy from API Manager. We have not done any coding or not worked on any implementation. We have just created the API specification and published to Exchange. So from Exchange, the same API that we have published, we are going to use the same API and deploy the application. Currently we are in sandbox because this is the basic profile and we just have the sandbox. But if you are working in any organizations, you might get development, sandbox, QA or so on, stage or prod environments. Now let's deploy proxy application to Cloud Hub. So let's name the proxy application. Now we are just adding the API from the Exchange and deploying it to Cloud Hub. So let's name the proxy app, click on next, and these APIs are the APIs that are available in the Exchange. So we have 3 APIs available in the Exchange of own organization. So we will get the applications that are available in our organizations only. Here we can see that we just have 3 APIs and 1 fragment. So these are the same APIs which are available in our organizations are reflecting here. You can choose these APIs and deploy the application. So for now we are choosing employee API. Let's select that and leave asset version is 1.0.1. We'll leave them as it is and we'll use the default values. And here we need to add the implementation URL. Let's use the mocking service that we have used to test the API from the API portal from Exchange. So let's use the same base URL to test the API. Let's use this as a implementation URL and let's see if we are able to deploy successfully. Till M we have copied and this is the base path /API. We have to remember this because in order to access the API we need to add this base path as well. So HTTP, those are the default options. So let's go with the default option. Base path we have and we have added the implementation URL. Let's save and deploy. Here we can see the information that we have selected. We have selected employees API from Exchange and trying to deploy it in the Cloud Hub server. The proxy URL is generated and using which we can access the API once the application is deployed successfully. It takes some time to deploy, so let's wait. Now the application is deployed successfully. We can use the proxy URL and test the API now. Right? This is the proxy URL that is generated. So it's saying no listener for the endpoint. Now let's go to, okay, we were using mocking service to test the API. So these employee, department name, query parameters, all these informations remains as it is. So let's use those details and try to test the API. And also we have to use the /API also because that was a base URI information that we have given, but it's not working. Because if we click on the implementation URL that we have given, we have copied this from the Exchange and given as an implementation URL, but it is giving an error. So this is the link that we have copied, right? To add it as a implementation URL. But this is giving an error because it's saying that we have to pass the proper authentication information. So let's use the public URL. Okay, let's go to configuration and edit the configuration information. Previously we were using the mocking service from the Exchange, but now let's replace it with the public URL of mocking service and base path remains as it is /API. Okay, let's save and deploy again. Now we have changed the implementation URL. Let's wait for it to get deployed. Let's copy the same information and try to access the API from Postman. So we can see the errors clearly. we are getting bad gateway. Let's change it back to HTTP. HTTP is the protocol that we have selected. So now we can see that we are getting an error, the same error that was that we were getting for the implementation URL, unauthorized access to resource, because we are not passing the proper authorization information. So this is the error we get when we try to access the mocking service as it is, because this feature is available for testing from Design Center and Exchange, not from outside like Postman or some other places. That's why we are getting this error. In order to fix this, we have an option. We can use a public URL. So now we have changed, right? We have changed the implementation URL to public URL. Public URL of mocking service. Okay, we are getting this error because currently we are using the mocking service from Exchange, but not the public URL of mocking service. Now we have replaced the implementation URL, so let's wait for it to get deployed. Okay, now the application is deployed with public mocking service URL. Okay, now let's go to Postman and test it again. Okay, we have the exact same URL, but this time we are using public URL of mocking service. So now we are getting the response as per the API specification. If we don't pass the required parameter, we will get an error. So, and if we don't match the pattern or the constraint set for the field, we will get an error saying the same, bad request. So this way we can use the API from Exchange and deploy to Cloud Hub server. Currently, the same application, the employee API application that we have created from Design Center and published to Exchange, is now deployed to Cloud Hub server from API Manager. So previously we were using the mocking service, but now the same application is deployed to Cloud Hub server. Now let's go back to API Manager and check the configuration details and see. We have to give the implementation URL and the base path. API was the base path that we have to use while accessing the API. In case if you modify the API specification again, you can do the changes and publish to Exchange. That way we can see the latest version that is currently available in the Exchange. And also if you want to verify what exact version is used for deployment, you can check here. This is the instance that is deployed in the sandbox. This is the same instance. We can check there. This is the API instance ID in sandbox, right? And the version of the API used for deployment is 1.0.3, which is the latest version. And environment name is sandbox. Currently we just have one environment sandbox. You can have multiple. And if you want to change the version, you can come to API Manager and select the version of your choice. If you want to select the older versions or something, you can select that and deploy, do the changes and save it. You can go to that particular environment. Currently we just have sandbox. Let's refresh. We should be able to see the older version now. Yes, this way you can check which environment has which version of the API that we have used for deployment. Now let's recall what we have done. We have used the existing API specification and published to Exchange and tested it from the API console and also from Postman. To test it from the Postman, we have used a public URL of mocking service, and we have deployed the proxy application from API Manager. And also we have seen an error while using the mocking service. So we have used the public URL of mocking service to fix this issue. Right? Yeah. That's it for today. Thank you. See you in next session.